Vulani, what would you add to that skill set or core elements?
Brian is right on the money in terms of that. Definitely passion. You have to be passionate about what you are working on, and really be driven, because some of the projects that we've mentioned, like I mentioned a bit earlier, some of the artists we used to work with back when, like early 2000s, late 2000s, maybe people don't even know that. Like, for example, I'll just be frank about, like, someone like Muncha or even Busis, who's big now. We had like all the albums, all the music that they're making. We had a gap because all our, like, I'll give you an example. Around 2005, we had already finished the work, and we were excited. We thought like people were gonna enjoy what we got, something new. I mean, people were going to get into it, and then a whole 5 years went by with no radio station accepting anything that we were doing. So at some point you start doubting yourself. Like, that's like, we were like, what is this? People were just franking off and telling us this is crap. This is not going to go anywhere, And literally about 7 years later, this very same album that we were ready with in 2005, it was entered again for the summers, and it won. 7 years later, the very same music that we were trying to. So people, sometimes you have to wait for people to catch up, maybe, Then in that time, though, only passion as a pride will push you through those times, right? And then also, just to add, also, I think also not to be scared. Fear is one of the worst things that you can. That will work against you. I know people most of the time, they mention money, they mention funds, and so those sort of things. I feel fear above anything else. To really do something that you feel strongly about is the worst thing, because this is what also speaks to the transdisciplinary approach of actually when you're doing work like work I'm doing. And also that's how you actually gain skills as well in different spaces. As Brian was mentioning, sometimes you might be an expert in something else, but then maybe you need to design an album cover. You can't find someone because you don't have the money. Then what you're going to do? The best way is to learn Photoshop, not because you want to learn to edit, but you don't have money to pay someone, so might as well do it yourself. Then you gain a skill as a result. So just surrounding yourself with people as well that can support you, that is also important. But again, like I said, fear is of really going and pushing to your is more detrimental than anything else, because also your work will suffer. You'll end up with maybe a product you're not really happy about. And sometimes, usually, those sort of projects which you work under and you're feeling like, okay, I need to be seen, I need to make money as quickly as possible, and you sort of like scale down the innovation part of it, or creativity, they'll always end up being, as the young people say, mid. They just they just disappear. Whenever I've taken a risk in my life, yes, there's hard times. There's usually a period that goes past that people are not with you, but in my lived experience, usually it might take 3 or 4 years, but they eventually catch up, and then you are like an innovator at that point. You are ahead of the curve. Same with what I'm talking about when I'm like the current work that I'm doing, like with around artificial intelligence and things like that. We had Nguni Machina already done and released in 2020, and only now people are starting to talk about AI music, and we're already down the ground. And actually, there's so much work that we have received from that project in the last 3 years. On a project we were just like messing around and going with what we were feeling. There was no at least the conversation wasn't as big around what's happening in terms of AI now. But now, it's finally catching up. So just taking risks and be careful of fear. It's actually a worse enemy for yourself than anything else, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think fear definitely holds you back, and we see it a lot, like with the young people who come through our program, is that also digital is like ever changing. Every day there's a new thing, and I think that you find that there's just people who are just really overwhelmed by it and really just afraid to try new things as well. But that's really what's gonna hold you back, Thanks for that. Another thing that's really important for us as Digify Africa is looking at gender inequity when it comes to the sector. So Eduardo, I'm going to start with you. Looking at data from a recent study done by Accenture, it's very clear that the tech and digital space is still definitely a boys' club. With, I think, the stats looking at about half the women who join or who start digital or tech careers sort of fall out of the industry by the time they're 35. What does such gender inequality, how does that impact the industry in general, and what can we do to start addressing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like cultural reasons in this space. Maybe it's the thing about being in the digital space means you need to take a lot of risk, which is harder for women if you want to have a family, and it makes it more difficult. And I think at Fakugezi we take a huge effort to try and push the other way. So, for example, as a festival, we've always been actually quite good, almost 50% in terms of male-female participation at the festival. And last year, we actually, for the first time ever, went over the 50%. There was like more than 50% of people are women, and then queer people coming to the festival. And in order to do that, we have to put a lot of effort into our programming to make it representative, to make women not just feel, but truly like come into the space and see themselves represented in all the work. But I think there's a lot of hope in Africa, particularly. There's some research that we're currently undertaking with VITS around what we're calling intermediaries. So not like the lower level of creatives, or I said lower just because there's hierarchies in terms of the amount of people. Mm-hmm. Intermediaries are people like curators and programmers and program directors. So imagine it as kind of people working in management or agents, etc. is a good example. And actually the research is showing that in Africa, female representation at these levels is much higher than in Europe even. That actually in Europe it's impossible to get into those positions as women. But in Africa there is the possibility. And in fact, there's a lot of those, so it's closer to 50%. Whereas in Europe, I think, I can't remember exactly the number, but it's somewhere from like 20 to 30%. So I think it does offer a lot of hope that we just need to keep on pushing. We shouldn't keep quiet about it. We were talking about it before we started, actually, that, we've been pushing at the festival also a lot more the LGBTQ angle, because I think that's also an important way to bring more people, both queer communities, but I think also for women, because they can see, if they're putting so much effort into minority communities, then I'm definitely also welcome. And a good example was we have these Fakuyoki, which is like a karaoke event that we have, and we had a queer one recently, and we couldn't figure it out. The first hour, no one wanted to sing. Everyone is very shy, which is the opposite to our usual events. But we kind of figured out after a while, they're checking out whether this actually is a safe space. They don't trust that it's safe. And as soon as people figured out it was safe, then it was crazy. Then the performances were... And for me, then what was so fulfilling was then the energy of the space, as soon as people felt they were safe, was incredible. You can't construct that energy even if you try. And I think if we can bring that energy into the creative sector, it will be really alive. And I think we just need to, you're smiling hard. So, and I think that's exactly what you do. So
not hard enough. And I guess if we're speaking about gender, then we do need to pull you into the conversation. Yeah. Running a company that is 100% Black woman owned, in the ad tech space. What is the reality of women in your sector, that you face every day? Are we seeing enough transformation?
I think, and with your point with Europe and Africa and having more women in Africa than in Europe, is that in Africa you are forced to do certain things, it's your environment that forces you to put yourself out there. Mm-hmm. And unlike in Europe, there's already a system that you need to push into. With us here, when I had to start, I started from scratch, right? I could not ask anybody for anything. It's a typical South African story where everybody had to do things for themselves, right? But I believe I think with us as African women, the environment forces you to be like, I'm going to create my own table. I'm going to create my own space. Whoever wants to join, they will come, and it's going to take forever, I'm okay with that, but we don't have any other choice but to create the tables and create the spaces for ourselves. And like, it's so sad because in my industry, it's you're right, there isn't a lot of us, and I think maybe that's also why I started my company, because I'm that girl who wanted to see like someone who looks like me. I'm like, where are they? So I'm like, okay, let me be the solution that I want to see, So but it's still so difficult. Like I promise you, I think for me, another way I was talking about processes and formalizing your business. Are we not doing that as well? Once you started your company, you're not now scaling and doing things to make sure that you actually your company outlives you. Those are the type of things that we now need to, they are serious. We have to make sure that we implement those type of things. So in my space, when I do find, I don't care if you are black, white, as long as there's a woman in my space, I get so excited because there isn't many of us, and what we go through is very different, because especially if you are a solo founder and now you're in a creative space, you feel like you're going mad, and you think like you're saying, you start doubting yourself, and if there's no tribe and other people that are doing something similar to you, it takes so much to get yourself out of the dark space to think that, okay, this is going to work. So I really pray that maybe we work in silo as well, like we do our own thing on our own. I wish that we can all just find each other, because when we do find each other, we always just feed off each other's energy, and you realize that whatever I was doing, I wasn't wrong, because I know now, I'm like, flip, I'm a visionary. Like, the things that I used to, like when COVID hit, my company went we quadrupled our revenue because I was already there, So as a woman now, I'm like, okay, I'm a visionary. I can, but if I don't have anybody else around me, I think maybe I'm not okay, So I hope that even if, I think all the things I've mentioned, that maybe there are ones that are maybe not for us, that are not pushing us forward. We kind of need to work on those things as well as women, to maybe try to always find your tribe, try to not work in silo, find people, find your tribe, so that there's no such thing as a boys club there's a boys club because the boys have a club, they come together.
Yeah.
So we need to create our own, but it's not going to be, of course it will be a girls club, it's a tribe, we welcome everybody, even I promise you, I've been part of boys clubs, and they're willing to listen to me, they're willing to help me if I voice myself out there and tell them what is it that I do. So I think we also need to find a way to find each other and create our own tribe and help each other, and for us to realize that we are not on our own, we can be there for each other and find resources that can help. Because when I'm listening about Timon, I'm like, what? I need to go there, I need to go find some talent there, So it's like, if I wasn't in the space, I wouldn't have known of this, So I think we really now need to find ways to put ourselves out there as women, and then maybe find a way to tackle the system as we go.
Yeah.
I've said a mouthful.
Oh man, fantastic. That mouthful was all fantastic. So thank you for adding to the conversation. I think it's really interesting, when we speak about, necessity being the mother of invention, or I guess innovation in this case over here. COVID definitely did that for the creative sector, The creative sector was hard hit by that global pandemic, and it really gave rise to some innovation out of a need for survival,
Yes.
So I'm going to start with you, Brian, and then come through to Vulani. I mean, can you speak to some of this innovation that we saw sort of born out of this need to survive a global pandemic, this need to keep a creative sector going that really thrived and sort of depended on human interaction, which we were now not allowed to have. There was a lot of innovation that had to come from the creative sector. Can you speak a bit about that, and maybe just how new and emerging technologies have impacted you as a creative, or the sector you're in?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like in terms of when COVID hit, it was kind of, it was a new space as I think humanity, as we as a humanity have been in, and so it was kind of that, kind of fight or flight. You had to kind of find ways to adapt to this new kind of being that we were all in. And so what you saw was where people before that were probably reliant, especially when it came to that content creation, were very reliant on like in person and doing stuff face to face and all this. It obviously then switched to more of a digital side of things and a digital way of working, and like actually finding ways to complete projects and whatnot, not necessarily having to be in the room with individuals, but actually utilizing technologies like Zoom and stuff that probably were available. Like video call was always available, but it wasn't something that was obviously used on a mass scale like it probably is used nowadays. But we found ways to be able to communicate and complete projects in ways that we probably would never thought of beforehand. So like I remember when we would start doing our Uber on tour in 2019, and we basically were on when we recorded the whole sort of trip, and we were with the videographer in South Africa, and we started to actually work on the tour itself, like while we were with the videographer in South Africa. And then when we came back, we were like, I had some parts and he had some parts, and we were like, all right, let's work on the parts separately, and then like let's try see if we can connect to actually put them together properly. But then through the pandemic then started, because obviously we came back in like March 2020 is when everything started, and we found ourselves having to now utilize technology like Zoom to be able to put this whole project together. And it was obviously not as clean as you'd like. When you're showing a video via Zoom or stuff, it can never be as clean as you may like it to be, or the audio may not come out as crisp. But we had to find ways to adapt to get things done, and I think that's what as maybe content creators started to do. And I think it's obviously now evolved in things how we do things now. Like we're in a space now, especially like as I said, with technologies and apps like TikTok that have now come, that we now are very much everyone, like anyone like can literally pick up a camera and become a content creator. You don't have to necessarily get the top of the range Sony AS7 or whatnot to be able to be putting out content on a YouTube or be like, yo, this is my YouTube channel. No, you can literally just pick up your phone and create content and build up. Like I said, it's building the foundation to build something up from that. And once you build yourself up using just your phone, maybe a few brand deals come through, and then you can start investing on those nice stuff. And that's how this world has evolved. Before, it was kind of not like it was gatekeep, but you kind of had this, especially when it was like early days of YouTube, you had like you have to get this equipment to be able to make this good content, to be able to work on YouTube and all these kind of platforms. But now it's a very much open market, and I think it was also driven in terms of content creators to be a lot more creative and think outside the box, and not just be your generic, this is what I do. Like, I want to take you on a tour of my day kind of thing. It's like, all right, what we actually trying to do here to, help entertain people or create content that I'm passionate about. So I think it's definitely helped in terms of, the variety of content we see, and also just like, I'd like to think it's allowed more people the sort of entry space into getting into that kind of digital space. So yeah, it's allowed us to evolve a lot more, and obviously we will further evolve as the technology develops and grows as well.
So I really think if you can find the spaces where they do like funds, like there's so many funding places that are available out there, but they usually will have a certain objective. So you just need to know which one does what for what you want to do, So I think that's probably the better way the faster way to do it right now.